want to share with you a reading from Grace Lynn, who is a children's author. This is an excerpt from an essay of hers called Windows, Mirrors, and Glasses. Grace Lynn on Seeing the World Through Diverse Books. When my daughter was 4, our doctor told us that she had amblyopia, a very common eye disorder in kids where the eyes and the brain are not working properly together. She needed lenses that would help strengthen the weakness, help strengthen the sight and brain connection, and basically fix the problem so she could see clearly. If she did not get glasses, we were told, it could permanently damage her vision. Our books, the books that are being banned, these books are like the glasses my daughter and I wear. Just like when I looked at a tree and saw every leaf, these books help kids look at their community and see every human. These books, when read and shared, can give kids a clear, true view of the world all around us. These books, that's a repeat, never mind. I can't help but think that not having these books can cause permanent damage. It's those who did not have these books when they were younger who are trying to ban them now. These books are giving them a glimpse of what the world truly looks like, and it's too much for them. They want to keep their glasses off. They want the comfort of not having to see everything with such clarity. Because the people who are trying to ban books are, in a sense, trying to withhold glasses from a whole generation of kids. Yes, some kids will be fine, but for others, those who need these books to see the world, banning these books will permanently damage their vision, maybe even damage their perception of the world to the extent that they cannot, will not recognize the humanity of their own community. Recently in Jamestown, Michigan, because the library would not censor LGBTQ+ themed books, residents voted to defund it, likely leaving the area less of a community space, less of a voting place, and without a library at all. While there was a certain schadenfreude about this on social media, they voted to get rid of the place they voted in. The ultimate heartbreaking message those voters sent us is we would rather have no community at all than see that LGBTQ+ people are human. Where does that leave us? It leaves us in a fight that we never wanted to be in, but one we must win. I don't have all the answers, but I know that we must push back against book bans. We must support our teachers, librarians, booksellers, authors, illustrators, schools, and bookstores. We must read and celebrate diverse books. And most of all, we must get as many of these diverse books to as many kids as possible so that they can see. Sometimes the books that people want to ban are banned for very serious adult reasons. Sometimes the books that people want taken out of collections are banned for being irreverent, for being silly, for being full of potty humor and maybe a little subversive. And so I'm going to share excerpts of one of those. Perhaps you have heard of it, Captain Underpants. Underwear is always funny. And Debbie is going to share some excerpts from an interview with the author of Captain Underpants. So just to give you a short overview of the story so far, because I will be reading from Captain Underpants and the Sensational Saga of Sir Stinks-a-Lot, which is the 12th epic novel by Dave Pilkey. The story so far, Captain Underpants, the 100% true truth. Once upon a time, there were two cool kids named George and Harold. They were smart and handsome and stuff. Thank you. Yes, we know. Me too. But they had the meanest principal ever. Name of Mr. Krupp, who says, blah, blah, blah. One time Mr. Krupp was being mean. You will be my slaves and stuff. So they hypnotized him. Not today, bub. Mr. Krupp was under George and Harold's spell. You are now Captain Underpants. Okay. And it was funny at first. Look at me. But it got really dangerous really quick. Captain Underpants wears only underpants and a cape. And he runs around singing tra-la-la. Then one day, Mr. Krupp drank some alien superpower juice and got real superpowers. Now, whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, he turns into Captain Underpants. And whenever Captain Underpants gets water on his head, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. So we've got that to deal with. But it gets worse. One day, George and Harold had a really big problem. So they borrowed a time machine, and they went back in time to fix the problem and created a totally new problem, and it got all crazy. The only good thing that happened is that we got 3 new pets that are half bionic hamsters and half pterodactyls. It's been a few weeks since our last adventure. The city has been rebuilt, and things are getting back to normal, but there are still lots of loose ends to our story. That can only mean one thing: another sequel.
This is from Dave Pilkey. The reasons people want to ban books always surprise me. Once I got into a conversation with someone who told me she enjoyed my picture books, but she did not like those Captain Underpants books. She didn't understand why I found it necessary to write about a little boy who flew around in his underwear. I replied, he's not a little boy, he's a middle-aged man. It soon became clear that this person was complaining about a book she hadn't even bothered to read. She just looked at the cover. One of the themes of the Captain Underpants series is to be careful not to judge a book by its cover. But of course, it's hard to get that message if you don't read the books.
This is the beginning of chapter 2, entitled The GOP Guarantee. If you read our last adventure, you're probably well aware of how George and Harold accidentally created duplicate versions of themselves. You know all the whys and whens and wherefores, so you're all caught up and ready to go. Congratulations. Good for you. Reading is power, ain't it? If you didn't read our last adventure, you're probably scratching your head and saying to yourself, hey, myself, what the heck is going on here? Before we get into all that, I should point out that it's impolite to use the word heck. These books have been criticized for their inappropriate language, and we are going to put a stop to that sort of thing once and for all. From now on, you won't be reading any more words like heck, or tinkle, or fart, or pee-pee. No, sir, those words are highly offensive to grouchy old people who have way too much time on their hands. In the interest of pleasing all the grouchy old people, GOP, out there, I have also included topics especially for them. So this adventure will contain references to healthcare, gardening, Bob Evans restaurants, hard candies, Fox News, and gentle yet effective laxatives. So sit back on your hemorrhoid pillows, turn up some Lawrence Welk music, and grab a snack. Black jelly beans that are all stuck together. It's time to enjoy the all-new, squeaky clean, fully appropriate, and non-offensive adventures of Captain Underpants.
Humor is subjective. You'll never convince someone to think that something is funny when they don't, and vice versa. I've been very fortunate in this respect. Most people who have read my books really enjoy them. The love far outweighs the hate, and that's what I prefer to focus on.
This is from chapter 22, entitled The Gang's All Here. Soon, everyone had gathered together in Old George's studio. There's lots of time travel here, so there's Old George and Young George. So Old George, his wife, and their kids, Mina and Nick, sat on the couch, while Old Harold, his husband, and their twins, Owen and Kai, plopped down in the giant beanbag chair. "Kids," said Mrs. Beard, "I'd like you to meet your fathers." "What's up?" said George. "We're your dads when they were kids," said Harold. "Wow, Dad," said Mina, "you used to be cute." "What do you mean, used to be?" said Old George. "We're here because we need to borrow your dads," said Harold. "They're the only adults we can trust." "Yeah," said George, "it's a real emergency." "Wait a minute," said Old Harold. "I don't remember doing any of this when we were kids. Do you, George?" "No," said Old George. "If this happened in our past, how come we have no memory of it?" "I don't know," said Harold. "Probably bad writing," said George.
Some people have criticized me for writing a short scene in one of the Captain Underpants books that includes a family with two dads. What I found perplexing was that many of those critics complained that they now had to explain to their 6-year-old kids that gay people exist, and sometimes gay people can get married and have kids. If the reality you've constructed for yourself and your family can be shattered by a children's book, maybe children's books aren't the problem. I don't think book banners need my help to make them look foolish.
Good morning. On August 12th of this summer, the writer Salman Rushdie was viciously attacked by a Shia Muslim while he was about to speak at a Chautauqua conference in upstate New York about persecuted writers in peril worldwide. The attacker was attempting to carry out a fatwa, a death sentence declared by Iranian Ayatollah Khomeini over 40 years ago, against Rushdie for alleged blasphemy in a work of fiction, in a novel, The Satanic Verses. The fatwa promised the perpetrator $3 million and eternal salvation. Although Rushdie was a highly regarded author, his previous novel, Midnight's Children, had won the Booker Prize, the book was banned in several countries, the first being Rushdie's native India. Neither the president of India, who banned the book, nor the Ayatollah Khomeini had read it. Later, Rushdie's Japanese translator was stabbed and died, his Italian translator was stabbed but recovered, and his Norwegian translator was shot but survived. Following the fatwa, Rushdie spent years in hiding, moving from one house to another in London, unable to travel. His forced seclusion failed to silence him, however. He continued to write novels and essays and defend free expression and writers around the world in writing and eventually in public. In an address to the American Society of Newspaper Editors in 1996, he described his belief that free societies are turbulent places. He states, "We live in an increasingly censorious age. By this I mean that the broad, indeed international acceptance of First Amendment principles is being steadily eroded. Many special interest groups claiming the moral high ground now demand the protection of the censor. Political correctness and the rise of the religious right provide the pro-censorship lobby with further cohorts. I want to suggest to you that citizens of free societies, democracies, do not preserve their freedom by pussyfooting around their fellow citizens' opinions, even their most cherished beliefs. In free societies, you must have the free play of ideas. There must be argument, and it must be impassioned and untrammeled. A free society is not a calm and eventless place. That is the kind of static, dead society dictators try to create. Free societies are dynamic, noisy, turbulent, and full of radical disagreements. Skepticism and freedom are indissolubly linked, and it is the skepticism of journalists, their show-me, prove-it unwillingness to be impressed, that is perhaps their most important contribution to the freedom of the free world. It is the disrespect of journalists for power, for orthodoxies, for party lines, for ideologies, for vanity, for arrogance, for folly, for pretension, for corruption, for stupidity, maybe even for editors, that I would like to celebrate this morning and that I urge you all, in freedom's name, to preserve. In 2000, Rushdie moved to New York, and despite death threats, began a more public life. 2004 was president of PEN America, an organization dedicated to the intersection of literature and human rights. Rushdie created the World Voices Festival, celebrating a global perspective on writers. This past spring, as part of the festival, PEN America brought 80 novelists, playwrights, poets, essayists, and journalists from 30 countries to the UN for an emergency World Congress of Writers to consider the question, can the power of the written word meaningfully bring about change in a world threatened by cascading crises and catastrophic events? At that event, Rushdie galvanized the assembly, and he said, among other things, a poem will not stop a bullet. A novel cannot defuse a bomb. But writers can still sing the truth and name the lies. We must work to overturn the false narratives of tyrants, populists, and fools by telling better stories than they do, stories within which people might actually want to live. Following the Satanic Verses, Rushdie wrote a children's book, which is an allegory of his position in the world, the position of the writer fighting dictatorship or tyrants. And this is how it begins. There was once in the country of Aleph Bay a sad city, the saddest of cities, a city so ruinously sad that it had forgotten its name. It stood by a mournful sea full of glumfish, which was so miserable to eat that they made people belch with melancholy, even though the skies were blue. In the north of the sad city stood mighty factories in which sadness was actually manufactured, packaged, and sent all over the world, which never seemed to get enough of it. Black smoke poured out of the chimneys of the sadness factories and hung over the city like bad news. And in the depths of the city, beyond an old zone of ruined buildings that looked like broken hearts, there lived a happy young fellow by the name of Harun, the only child of the storyteller Rashid Khalifa, whose cheerfulness was famous throughout that unhappy metropolis, and whose never-ending stream of tall, short, and winding tales had earned him the nickname Rashid, the Ocean of Notions, as stuffed with cheery stories as the sea was full of glumfish. That's from Harun and the Sea of Stories.
Now, Mildred and Jessi and I are going to end our service with the Freedom to Read statement. And this is from the American Library Association and the Association of American Publishers. And it's really powerful, so I invite you to take it in.
We therefore affirm these propositions. It is in the public interest for publishers and librarians to make available the widest diversity of views and expressions, including those that are unorthodox, unpopular, or considered dangerous by the majority.
Publishers, librarians, and booksellers do not need to endorse every idea or presentation available. It would conflict with the public interest for them to establish their own political or aesthetic views and stand for determining what should be published or circulated.
It is contrary to the public interest for publishers or librarians to bar access to writings on the basis of someone's personal history or the political affiliation of the author.
There is no place in our society for efforts to coerce the taste of others, to confine adults to the reading matter deemed suitable for adolescents, or to inhibit the efforts of writers to achieve artistic expression.
It is not in the public interest to force a reader to accept the prejudgment of a label characterizing any expression of its author as subversive or dangerous.
It is the responsibility of publishers and librarians as guardians of the people's freedom to read to contest encroachments upon that freedom by individuals or groups seeking to impose their own standards or tastes upon the community at large, and by the government whenever it seeks to reduce or deny public access to public information.
It is the responsibility of publishers and librarians to give full meaning to the freedom to read by providing books that enrich the quality and diversity of thought and expression. By the exercise of this affirmative responsibility, they can demonstrate that the answer to a bad book is a good one. The answer to a bad idea is a good one.
We do not state these propositions in the comfortable belief that people read, that what people read is unimportant. We believe rather that what people read is deeply important. That ideas can be dangerous, but that the suppression of ideas in a democratic society or is harmful to a democratic society. Freedom itself is a dangerous way of life, but it is ours. So thank you for joining us today for our banned book service. Thank you to Benny for being a wonderful guest, and to all of our readers and guests today. And I hope you will go out and see our new library and get a banned book.